Good afternoon, folks, or good evening, depending on the time zone you're in. Welcome to this month's webinar. The topic today is Enterprise Agility. For those who are joining us first time in this series, every month we do these webinars on topics related to Agile software development or software development in general, but mostly focus around Agile practice. So the topic today, Enterprise Agility. Let me describe the topic. As most of you know who've been practicing Agile, that Agile in this form has been around for a little over a decade, or actually close to 12 years or so now. The Agile Manifesto was written in 2001 time frame, and most companies kind of have realized significant benefit from practicing Agile, but one of the challenges that we consistently observe is that most of the benefit has been around at the team level, and there are many flavors of Agile which get practiced in no particular benefit of one over the other, Scrum or XP or Kanban, but all of them are at an isolated team level. And when you start thinking about applying those Agile principles to scale the benefit, business benefit at the enterprise level, that's where the challenges start coming in. So in this session, we'll address this challenge by exploring the concept of enterprise agility. Enterprise agility is about applying the principles and values of Agile to create an ecosystem, essentially, around the organization that embraces and supports Agile throughout the enterprise, not just at the isolated team or teams level. And before I introduce the speaker, let me just go through quick logistics. We'll have the presentation for about 45 minutes, and we'll take some questions along the way. If the question that you bring up is such that it better be answered in the flow of the discussion, then I'll pick that up and bring it for Damon to answer. Otherwise, we'll take some questions towards the end also. And after the session is done today, later today or tomorrow, we will make the document available, and we are also recording this session, so a document and recording both will be available to people who have interest in listening to this, but for scheduling reasons were not able to join. Okay. With that, let me introduce our speaker today. The speaker is Damon Poole. He's a regular presenter in the series of monthly webinars. Damon is the Chief Agilist at Eliason Group. He has close to 20 years of experience supporting and helping teams ranging from small co-located Agile teams to 80 or so collection of teams in the global environment. Damon was president of Agile New England from 2008 to 2010, and he writes frequently on the topic of Agile development. He's the author of web book Do It Yourself Agile, and he is a thought leader and pioneer in the area of multi-stage continuous integration and mixing Scrum and Kanban. And he's a regular presenter at various international Agile conferences. We were just chatting. He's also scheduled to present the upcoming biggest Agile conference in Nashville, Tennessee in August that we all attend regularly. And he has trained nearly 1,000 people in Agile techniques. He is also a co-founder and past CEO and CTO of AccuRev, where he created multiple award-winning products, including AccuRev and AccuWorkflow. So he's the right guy for us to learn more about enterprise agility. With that, over to you, Damon.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much, Hemant. So as Hemant said, this has a lot to do with going beyond Agile at the team level. We'll get a little bit more into what that means. But I'd like to start out with why bother, really? So at the end of the day, I think the reason for going Agile, there are a lot of good reasons: happier employees, higher quality product, all of that. At the end of the day, though, from the organization's perspective, it needs to make more money for it to be really attractive. And so let's talk a little bit about how much more money Agile can make you. And when I say Agile here, I'm really saying, for Agile to be really successful, it needs to be something that the enterprise, I'm going to use the word enterprise and organization interchangeably here, that the enterprise has adopted completely, right? Not just at the team level, but as an organization, we're adopting it, overall. So one of the ways that Agile can help, especially if you're doing it at the enterprise level, is reducing your cycle time. And cycle time, often we're thinking about, okay, for development, but cycle time in this context really means from the business has an idea, because IT has a project is great, but don't forget it took time to get that project funded and started and scoped and all that, right? So from the time that somebody on the business says, I think our organization needs this project in order to, in this case, we'll say save or make $100,000 a month over the life of the project being used. So if your cycle time is 9 months from concept to cash, if you will, and you can reduce that cycle time, and there are lots and lots of ways to reduce cycle time with Agile. We're not going to really get into the details on how you do that, but common thing that happens with Agile is that you reduce your cycle time. So if you were to reduce it by 3 months and you think that you're going to bring in 100K, now this is, this would be whatever your numbers would be, and generally people don't kick off projects without some understanding of how much they're going to create or save. In this case, if you reduced your cycle time by 3 months, that's 300K, that you're going to make 3 months early, right? So that's actually a lot of value. That's a simple example, and if you reduce your cycle time in general, then that means that any project you do, you're going to make more money. And this has, nothing to do with discovering new markets or innovating or anything like that. That's just, you said you're going to make 100K a month. In this case, you're going to make 300K extra. And the actual numbers, of course, are up to you. Now, another example is a lot of folks are familiar with the concept from the Agile community of minimum viable product. So the idea is not that we're only going to do this, but what is the value? If I look at this project overall, what are the things that primarily make up its value? And what's something that I could release and people would say, oh, that's a good version of the product. I understand you have newer versions coming, but I would be happy to use this right now. So you go through that exercise that's called minimum viable product. And let's say you've got a project that you're thinking, okay, 1 release, but maybe I could break it up into 3 releases. So in this case, if it's 9 months, maybe every 3 months. And I look at it, and there's 3 MVPs. But then when I look at that third one, I think, when I partition it out this way, I've got a really valuable first one and a really valuable second one, but the stuff that's left over, I'm not sure that, now that I look at it that way, I'm not even sure that makes sense to put that out there. I think the money that it's going to cost me to do that third segment, I should use that on something else. But in any case, if I can release each MVP independently, maybe if I was going to make 100K, that 50K of that value is going to come from the first one, just to make it simple, and 50K from the second one. Then if I release them as they're ready, the potential in this particular example is to make 450K, right? So now I'm making even more money. Not only that, but the money that I would have spent for the third chunk, if I'm not going to do it anymore, that's even more money that I've saved, right? So this is really starting to pile up, and this is why you do Agile, right? At the end of the day, this is why you do Agile. There are other side effects as well. There is a third thing that you can do, which very commonly happens, is that you have a lot of projects in process. Now, if you looked at these 3 projects, they're being run, at the same time in parallel, and they have resources in common. And the issue here is that when you have people working on multiple projects at a time, if let's say that these projects, if they were run by those resources one at a time, actually it would be 9 months of effort each, but the schedule is 18 months for all of them because we're working on 3 at a time. Why do we do that, first of all? Well, the simple reason is all of the stakeholders there are saying, well, if you're not working on my project, I'm pretty sure because of years of experience, if you're not working on it, it's never going to happen, so I want you to be working on it. That's actually an anti-pattern, right? We need to find ways to break through that. Obviously, it's not easy, but here's the payoff. If I do these one at a time, I start to get that value early. And again, 100K for each of them a month, and right, your actual mileage will vary here. You got to put in your numbers. But in this example, let's say it's 100K a month. We're talking on this simple example, we're talking about almost $2 million more money. And these aren't necessarily large projects or large teams or anything like that. So just imagine if you're anticipating making more per month, or you have larger projects, or more projects. That's a lot of money that we're talking about. So from my perspective, this is very motivating. This makes me want to look at how can I be more agile? How can I spread it out? So what are the problems? What gets in the way?
Damon, let me clarify the previous page. So you're not saying in this case that the project A in this way has a reduced scope from the previous page. Same scope, but you're just finishing one early rather than running 3 in parallel for a longer time.
Right. Rather than running 3 in parallel, I'm working on project A, only on project A, getting it done. Working on project B, only on project B, getting it done. And it's very common. I was at a client the other day, and they were talking about how they were doing Agile, and they had 35 projects in flight. And I said, wow, that must be a lot of people. How many total noses is that, if you will? And he said 35. So they had exactly as many people as they had projects, and that was a really great example of you know, the kind of having work in process that you can have, and looking at, I'm sure if you did this kind of analysis, you would find that there's a lot of money being left on the table, right? So basically, rather than having all those projects in process, do a few of them, get them done, do a few of them, get them done. And then, you know, it's not easy to do. You have to build up trust and credibility with the stakeholders. But once they start realizing they're going to get their projects out there sooner in general, what's not to like? But there are problems. So one of the problems is that when we say we're doing Agile, what does it really mean, right? Usually that means we're doing Scrum or XP or Kanban, and most people are familiar with what that is. But there's an issue here, right? And so in the Scrum community, they talk about Scrum Butt, and then, you know, on the other side of that, people say, oh, I see, you're a purist, you know, you don't understand how we have to tailor Scrum in our organization and all that kind of thing. And, you know, myself, this may sound like being a purist or a fundamentalist, but I'm very practical, very pragmatic, and it's not about Agile per se. It's about, you know, making more money, becoming more effective. Call it Agile or not, doesn't matter to me. But if you want to get the benefits of Scrum, really you have to do Scrum. So let's look at an example. So air travel, you want the benefit of getting across the country for $400 in 6 hours. There is exactly one and only one way to do that. And that's not necessarily Southwest here, but, you know, a jet. And you need a plane, you need trained pilots, you need at least 2 runways, obviously, right? And so if you take out any of these, you do not have, you're not going to get the benefit of here to there in 6 hours for $400. It's just not going to happen, right? So if you don't have control surfaces, you better take real care in lining up that plane and hope there's no weather in between here and, you know, the other coast. So it's really the same thing with Scrum, right? Here's Scrum. Scrum is very simple. There's almost nothing to it. But if you start changing what it is, you say, well, I don't really need a cross-functional team. I'll have all developers on that team, and then when they get done, then we'll give it to you. That's it's not Scrum, and it's okay, right? Practically speaking, if that's where you're starting, that's where you're starting. It's all right. But if you want to get the huge benefit that Scrum can bring, you got to think about how can I create a real cross-functional team? How can I have them working on only one project? Right? Doing Scrum is not hard. Doing Scrum is easy if you can create a cross-functional team, if they can work on only one project, if you're using user's choice, if you have a product owner, right? So if you have all those conditions, but the hard part about doing Scrum is getting those conditions to be in place. If you've got a small team, a small company with only 8 people in it, great. But if you've got an organization with hundreds of teams, or even, you know, 5 teams, 10 teams, now what do you do, right? That's the hard part. So let's take a little bit more look at this, right? So if I've got just 3 teams and I want to do Scrum, and they're all working on the same program, you know, what part of Scrum tells me how to coordinate these? You know, what are the practices out there for coordinating this and making Scrum work at the enterprise level? So if I were to do this in a public setting, right, everybody would shout out Scrum of Scrums. Okay, so now my question to you is, what's the second one? Well, there isn't anything. And the other thing is that Scrum of Scrums actually does not come from Scrum. It comes from the Agile community. Many people suggest it's become very popular, but it's not actually part of the Scrum guide. So a very typical response here from many organizations is, well, I know what to do. Traditional project management has that, right? So we'll wrap the teams with that traditional project management and do things like we'll project manager it such that in 3 months we take the output from the 3 teams and we integrate it together. That's a very common traditional thing to do. It hurts Agile, but that's a very traditional thing to do. It's a very typical thing to do. That's the way it is. So the other thing is, hey, it's called Agile development, so it must be for the development phase. And of course, you know, we need requirements and estimation, we need to do design, we need to do planning, and we can't test until we've got something to test, right? And user acceptance, what's the point of doing that until we're all done, right? So those are all valid questions, right? How in the world can we do it without doing requirements and estimation, without doing design, without doing planning? Agile and Scrum don't say to leave those out. They say to try to put as much of it as you possibly can within the iterations. And that's hard. It's counterintuitive, absolutely. But that's why, you know, it's the hard part of Scrum is not Scrum itself. It's solving these kinds of problems, right? So if we're going to be talking about enterprise agility, these are the kinds of things that we need to take into account. So that's also an example of an organizational issue. And so let's talk about that in general. So if you're trying to do Agile and you look at the organization, organizations were not purpose-built for Agile, right? They were purpose-built for traditional development because that's what's out there. That's how we grew up in the industry, is doing traditional development. You know, many people call it waterfall, but I prefer to just call it traditional because many people say, well, I'm not doing, you know, waterfall per se. But anyway, traditional development, right? So the whole organization is pushing to help you do traditional development. And you know, what exactly is this? We'll get into that in a moment to give you some specifics. But now, if I want to go Agile, I'm going in a different direction, and those tailwinds become headwinds, right? It's slowing me down. It's making me difficult. So if you really want to be Agile within this organization that's purpose-built for traditional development, well, then you really better believe in Agile and put in extra hours and extra effort. And that's not always easy to do, right? So oftentimes organizations that don't switch the ecosystem to be more Agile supporting, Agile starts to die out. And it's sad but true. I've seen it a lot. So what are some potential solutions? So at Eliason, we're agnostic, right? So just like with Scrum, Kanban, and XP, whatever makes sense in your environment, you know, we can help you figure out what that is. But whatever makes sense to you, we're going to support that. And that's primarily what people talked about, right? Scrum, Kanban, XP, and you know, there's a couple others out there, but those are the 3 main ones. So Eliason's approach is the same thing at the enterprise level. There are many ways to create an Agile ecosystem. There's the Scaled Agile framework, which is very popular. Another one is Enterprise Agility, and that's what we're going to be focusing on today. There's others out there. Alarm and Bond have a book out there that talks about scaling frameworks. There's FW1 and FW2. Scrum.org is coming out with Enterprise Scrum soon, and we'll be looking to support that as well. And then the default, really, at the end of the day, the #1 approach is to roll your own, right? And that's typically where a coach comes in and says, in my experience, it makes sense to do this and that and the other thing. And the interesting thing about that roll your own is a lot of those things that the coaches come up with are very similar. And so enterprise agility is really, you're not going to see anything particularly new or different in there. It's really just saying, here are the things that the community talks about doing a lot. Let's just put it all in one place and make it really clear that these are the things that generally work really well. All right, so let's talk more about enterprise agility. Right, so there is this model behind enterprise agility, talking about how to make funding decisions, what management should look like, how to manage MVPs and epics, measuring cycle time. There's all kinds of details in here. In a webinar format, in just you know, under an hour, it's impossible to cover all of this. The idea here is just to give you an introduction to the topic, give you something to think about while you're looking at and thinking about how am I going to scale Agile to the enterprise. And this is one approach. So first off, let's talk about the organizational level. So we were talking about how organizations are purpose-built for traditional development. Well, if you're going to have a bunch of agile teams, if you're going to start, going agile at the team level, at the enterprise level, you need to think about how to get the organization overall to support them. Right? What would a purpose-built agile supporting organization look like? Part of the difficulty here too is that you're not necessarily going to go all agile overnight. You don't see a lot of that. So if you're going to support both over time, right, that makes it particularly tricky. But you need to be thinking about it, and here for enterprise, whether it's you're doing enterprise agility or what, these are the top 10 things that you want to look at as you're rolling out Agile across the organization. So we'll go through one or two of these, especially the funding. We'll go into a little bit more depth, but these are the things to be thinking about. So if you're looking to have an Agile team, cross-functional team, but your compensation is entirely individual based, right? That might not be motivating the kind of behavior you're looking for in a cross-functional team. Oh, I know it's more valuable to get that story to done, but I'm a developer, so why would I do any testing? I don't get any. My compensation's not based on that, right? So that causes clashes, right? So if compensation has a component, doesn't have to be entirely, but has a component of team basis or delivery basis, then especially let's say delivery basis, if a component of my compensation is based on that, I'm thinking, how can we get that delivered? And it looks like we're falling a little bit behind on testing. Rather than me opening up a new story and potentially, adding some new bugs, let me go help out on the testing there. And I'm not saying necessarily, for those of you that are thinking I'm saying test your own code, I'm not saying that. Test somebody else's code. But if there's code that needs to be tested, functionality that needs to be tested, um, it seems to make more sense to get that done than to open up yet another story and potentially create more problems, right? So there's all kinds of things here. One in particular is funding, right? So one of the things that hurts Agile is that in an organization that's purpose built for traditional development, we have a budget cycle. And yeah, I understand that you're not necessarily going to be able to change this overnight, but perhaps you can look at doing this a little bit. At least moving towards minimum viable products helps get you there, right? So typically you have a large funding cycle, and we have to make decisions, right? To make those decisions, we need something fully, all the requirements there, scoped out, and that can take a long time. So if we're really going to be agile and we're going to be able to make decisions and change our mind every iteration, we need to be able to fund that. So doesn't it make sense, rather than funding whole projects, to look at funding minimum viable products, right? And so you've got a number of different funding sources out there, right? So this funding source is for this program or multiple programs or a couple of things within a overall program or portfolio, right? So look at that and say, okay, normally this group makes decisions in this area. All right, great. So if you've got multiple teams there, have them estimate out a couple of MVPs, and then have the funding group, the folks making the decisions, look at the MVPs. It's going to be smaller, easier to understand, easier to prioritize, and say, you know what, we've got one team working on this program, and they're working on this MVP that is clearly the most important thing for the company to be doing. Let's put another team in there. And we've got this other group that's got 3 teams, and we've decided that the priority of that is not as high. Let's reconstitute. And you can't necessarily do it if it's going from .NET to Java or something like that, but right. So it gives you context to have those discussions and say, hey, we've got 3 Java teams over here, one over here. Let's move one of those Java teams, Java-based teams, over to this other thing that has more value, right? So you're doing that anyway today, but you might be doing it yearly on huge projects. So just think about taking all the same things that you're doing there and apply it instead at the minimum viable product level. And that's easy for teams to do as well because they're already estimating out into the future to some degree. So working around an MVP structure, that's not that hard. All right, so that's one example at the organizational level. Let's dive all the way down now to the team level. Why is it important to talk about the team level when we're talking about the enterprise overall and synchronizing multiple teams? Well, the simple reason is that if you need to coordinate the effort of multiple teams, and you're going to be doing things like funding based on MVPs, You need things to go fast and smooth. And if, as a team, I don't have anything ready till the end of my iteration, it's going to take me a long time to integrate it. It's going to be bigger things, more go wrong, right? So what are the things that we can do at the team level that makes it easier to integrate across the organization or across teams? Well, there's a whole bunch of things that the Agile community knows. None of these are going to be surprises to you. I'm just saying these are exactly the things that you need to be thinking about, and they're important if you want to scale. So to get each individual team to be really good and make that integration smoother, here are the guidelines, right? So each team choose to do either Scrum, Kanban, or XP. Yeah, there's other stuff out there, but these three really mix together well, right? A lot of people do Scrum and XP. A lot of people are starting to fold Kanban into Scrum. A lot of people doing Kanban also do XP. A lot of times when people start out with XP, they start folding in Scrum practices, right? So these three go together really well. The next guideline is if you have more than one Scrum or XP team in your program, pick an iteration length for those of 1, 2, or 4 weeks. Why not 3? If you got one team at 4 and one team at 3, guess when they're integrating? Every 12 weeks. That's too long. That's too long. So if everybody picks 1, 2, or 4, the maximum that you're going to hit there is 4. That's pretty good. Product owner for each team, right? Well understood, not always done, but well understood. Implement one-piece flow. We'll talk about that in a little bit in a minute. A lot of people are using a card wall, but it makes things much more visual and obvious. You can see bottlenecks, and to really make those bottlenecks clear, think about implementing work in progress limits, something that comes from Lean and Kanban. So having work in progress limits low, that means things are going to be flowing through the team really quickly, and you're going to be getting to done really quickly, and you're going to be able to integrate across teams much more frequently. So there are a lot of things at the team level. A couple more here is TDD, right? Rather than getting into the details of TDD, I'm just going to tell you that in my experience, large organizations almost always naturally gravitate towards doing TDD at the team level. If they're going to have any, when you see success, you see a lot of TDD at the team level, and automation, and having really great user stories. If you've got giant user stories that are not vertical slices, not following invest, don't have acceptance criteria, aren't following definition of ready and done, I got to tell you, it's going to be really hard to integrate the work of those multiple teams, right? So this is something that the Agile community has been saying for a long time, and it particularly applies when you're going across the enterprise, right? So nothing particularly earth-shattering here, but hey, these are the kinds of things that you'll hear from the Agile community, and now they're all in one place. All right, so I mentioned one-piece flow. What is that? So if you look at an iteration over time, often what you see is actually just a couple of big stories. I see that all the time, right? Well, we said we could get it done in the iteration, so why do we need to break it down anymore? It's good to break it down into small stories so that you can get things done throughout the iteration. Testing doesn't have to wait. You can, start writing test cases and executing them much earlier. And the idea here is you want to get to done as fast as you possibly can, right? Because you want to be doing continuous integration. And continuous integration here does not mean, if you go and look at Martin Fowler's original paper on this subject, continuous integration is not talking about individual teams doing it by themselves. They're talking about anything that you're doing at the team level, checked into the main line as soon as you possibly can, and continuous integration run across the entire program or product, right? So you want to get stories done as fast as you possibly can, make sure that the CI is working, and other teams can take advantage of the fact that you got your code in there and can say, hey, either you broke something or we broke something, and get that integration done as soon as you possibly can. There's no good reason to wait, and the larger, the more teams you've got going, the better. So one engagement I'm working in, their goal is to have 500, I kid you not, 500 teams up and running by the end of the year. Now, to be fair, that's going across 12 different lines of business, and I think the largest one is 140. And if you look at within the program level, there are smaller groups there. But what they're finding is that the more successful teams are successful. The more successful programs are successful because at the team level, they're doing a lot of these things and getting to done on a regular basis with small stories. Right? So that's the idea of one-piece flow or small. It's called one piece, but really it means as few people working on as few things as possible, getting them done as fast as possible. Okay, so we talked about at the organizational level. We gave one example there. We went down to the team level, went to a bunch of practices. What about going across teams, right? So we got the scrums. What else can we do? All right, so enterprise agility, now this is a little prescriptive, but is basically suggesting and guiding that you do a couple of things above and beyond Scrum. So in Scrum, right, you have the iteration planning meeting, you have stand-ups, the iteration review, and then the iteration retrospective. So scaling this up to the enterprise level, enterprise agility says, yeah, have your stand-ups, absolutely, at the team level. So, right, so the circles represent individual teams, either working as individual teams, standalone teams, or coming together, right? So do the team stand-ups as a team, then send representatives to do the stand-up of stand-ups, right, on a daily basis. And then at the stand-up of stand-ups, you need whoever it is that you would escalate problems that you run into that go across multiple teams, whoever that you would escalate that to, they should be standing right there. Come to that meeting, right, so that they can act on that immediately. Why wait? Right, so whenever you do it that way, what organizations find is that they're solving problems earlier, getting them out of the way, and then what they were previously doing, like having a steering committee meeting or staff meeting or whatever once a month or every 2 weeks or even every week, rather than problems piling up and getting gridlock, you're resolving things quickly, doing root cause analysis. Why did this even come up? I never want to see that again. That's really the role of leadership, is to make a smooth running machine, and stand-up of stand-ups, showing up for those is one of the things that makes that happen. Okay, we'll get back to the backlog grooming in a moment. But things that generally happen at the end of the iteration in Scrum, we're not saying necessarily do this, because if you're doing all Kanban, you're not going to have iterations, but on a regular cadence, so that goes across whether you're doing Scrum, Kanban, or XP, on a regular cadence, and it might be every iteration, do your iteration review or team review at the team level. Then come together and show the whole product, right? Have the whole product built every iteration, on a regular cadence. Show that the full product is working. Do the full product review just like you would normally do at the team level. Then go back to your individual teams, do your team retro, right, and say, wow, based on the full product review, what we thought we'd done right and we didn't do right, how did that happen? Oh, our product owner didn't talk to, whatever it is that comes out of the team retro. Then get together, send representatives, do a retro of retros. What are we as a group working towards a common cause? What are we running into? What's working well? Oh, that's working well for you? Oh, that's a great idea. We'll do that too. Oh, that's not working for you. It's not working for us either. We've got to escalate this. How can we not run into this problem again? Right. So if it's good at the team level, it's good at the team of teams level. And then going back to the weekly, right? So typically in Scrum, at least, you have iteration planning. But ask yourself, if you've been doing Scrum for a while, do you wait till iteration planning to groom the backlog? Probably not. In my experience, most teams that have been doing Scrum for a while naturally gravitate towards weekly backlog grooming. And if you look at it really, if you're doing weekly backlog grooming, that iteration planning meeting becomes, there's not much to it, right? So enterprise agility says, rather than having iteration planning, just do weekly backlog grooming, and whatever you would normally accomplish in the iteration planning, start distributing that out to the weekly meetings. You'll find that it goes a lot smoother.
Kevin, if we take one question here on this page.
Sure.
On this topic of Scrum of Scrums, how far can you take that up? How many levels is that feasible? So if you have a number of teams, can you do Scrum of Scrum for 10 teams, and then for 10 of those, you can do Scrum of Scrums? Is that a feasible way for larger teams, or?
I think that gets into a whole discussion right there. And the best answer is sort of a consultative answer, and it really depends on the organization. One of the largest ones I've seen is 20 representatives. I think that's kind of pushing the boundaries. 20 people on the same program. I think if you've got more than 20 teams on a program, I think you want to start asking yourself why. Is this really effective? I think you want to look at breaking the program down into separate products, perhaps, or separate programs. I think especially one of the things that you find when going to Agile is that you can accomplish things with smaller teams when you're doing Agile, and that more is not necessarily better. But that's perhaps a whole topic. And what I would say is that for sure this works up to about 20 teams, and that's what I've seen happening, like with the group I was talking about earlier, with the 140 teams being one of the 140 teams in one program being one of the largest ones in that engagement. That was organized in the past into component teams and architectural. Basically, they were layered architecturally, and they weren't really coordinating all that well on a regular basis before. So it really depends on the situation, but I would say that if you've got more than 20 teams on a program, you want to look at breaking that up. Okay. And I've definitely seen it work with up to 20.
Okay.
Okay, so once you've laid this all out, right, that pretty much covers reviews, retros, and planning. And really the reason for the backlog grooming on a weekly basis with enterprise agility is that if you find a problem in that weekly backlog grooming, the team's still going to move forward, but then you realize, ooh, I got to go talk to the product owner on that other team because we've got a dependency on them, and then the next week that other team says, all right, hey, the product owner on that team says, hey team, we got a story we got to do for this other team, right? Because at the end of the day, we're all in it together. So having that backlog grooming on a weekly basis, it's a lot easier to synchronize between multiple teams, and then to work towards those MVPs for things like funding decisions.
All right. One more question, since this was a topic, I think you and I were talking separately. So the question is, in your experience, do organizations really provide Agile teams or expect Agile teams to deliver only how much they can deliver, or ultimately business calls all the shots and stretches Agile teams to deliver more than the normal capacity? Right?
Well, there's no great answer for that other than the truth. And I would say it's like, think about a microwave oven. How many meals can you how many meals can you stuff into a microwave oven? Exactly one. Yeah. If you stuff a second one in there, it's not going to work too well.
Right.
So
one of them will be undercooked.
Sure. The truth is, yeah, absolutely. The truth, undercooked, low quality. Right? The truth is that a team has a certain capacity, and that's it. You can go over capacity at your own peril. Right. It is what it is. Now, how do you address that, though, I think is really what's behind that, which is working with the business, right? Working with the business to help them understand what capacity is, and what reality is. And if that doesn't work out, then you're really no worse off than you were already. It's just it is more visible, and off sort of us versus them. But at the end of the day, we're all in this together, and the more transparency and visibility, the better decisions we're all going to make. And I think that is one of the things that comes out from the beginning. One of the things that I think often the business hears is, "Oh, great. You're telling me we can do quarterly releases now, so I think that means the 4-quarter effort I can jam into 1 quarter." No, right? So you got to start somewhere, and sometimes it can be a little rocky. But I think once people start to see what Agile can do, they start to realize that they want faster and have more input. So it's something we'll talk about in a moment. It really is. It's not happening overnight. Sure. Okay, so one of the things actually that is applicable to that is, there are a lot of maturity models out there and everything. I understand that. The Enterprise Agility Matrix is specifically geared towards transformation. The idea that you're starting from someplace, you're going someplace, and hey, you know what? You need to measure it. You need to understand making progress in the right areas. Are we all, singing to the same tune, right? Are we all on the same page here? So the idea here, just to give you 2 quarters, 44 total, that there's 5 areas, 0 to 4, and any particular, and you can think of these as KPIs. Any particular KPI, you're either impeded in transition at a sustainable place, Agile or, just amazing. We'll call that ideal. The idea is that if you're in ID, you should be going and, doing a presentation at Agile 2014 or something. Sustainable, which is where we try to get people to, is, making a mission is like pushing a rock uphill. It takes constant effort to push the rock uphill until you hit a flat spot, right? And then you can take a breather and go, push a different rock uphill. But if you let go, it's going to slide right back down. So you want to get to sustainable as many things as you can first before going crazy and getting really good in various areas. So focus on sustainability first and then move on. So this is sort of the outline, and within the matrix it shows within each cell what it means to actually be there in English, so you can say, oh, that's us or it's not us, right? And then there's a whole lot of them. There's 10 at the organizational level, and then broken up into various categories at the per team level. And an obvious question here might come up with, people might come up with, is like, wow, that's going to be information overload. Can I simplify this in some way? Absolutely. But it's got to be something that makes sense to you. And if you were to look at this, and by the way, you can get a copy of this. We'll talk about that at the end. You'll see, okay, there's some of these things that are more important to me than others. And yeah, you can definitely boil it down. But it's a great starting place, and you can look at it and say, okay, here are going to be my key KPIs. So where you start out, right, if you are not doing any Agile at all, is pretty much zeros, which is, corresponds to impeded. You weren't trying to be Agile. It's not a reflection, you're doing anything wrong. You just weren't trying to be Agile. But now that you're trying to be Agile, these things are impeding you. So you want to get out of there as fast as you possibly can. You need to set goals, reasonable goals, right? So here's some goals that one organization might set. Not fantastic everywhere. We've got to focus on a couple of things, but here's our goals. You might have short-term, medium-term, long-term goals, but you set goals, and these things take time. Going Agile is not something that takes overnight, that you can do overnight. It takes potentially years. And you might think, oh, years, I don't want to do that. But you're going to get the benefits as you go. You don't have to wait to the end, right? But really getting to the goal that you want, the big benefits, it's going to take time. So if it's going to take time, what approach are we going to use, right? So Enterprise Agility has within it a transformation approach, and that starts out with, hey, let's be Agile, right? So if I've got work that I need to do, am I going to transform this team or that team? I got to schedule some training, I got to get a coach, I got to hire an expert, I got to set up the team, right? That sounds like a project to me. Who's going to do the individual pieces of that project? Which pieces of the project are the most important? That sounds familiar. So the idea here in Enterprise Agility is to run the transformation as an Agile project, right? And follow the principle of the simplest thing that could possibly work. Don't create these huge and complicated plans. Start somewhere, because you know what? As you get going, you'll find that what you thought you needed to do changes, just like a regular Agile project. And look at everything that you might do and say, hey, does this measure up against the Agile Manifesto or not? Is this truly Agile or not? And again, don't try to do everything at once. Don't create a giant plan. So the idea of incremental architecture, you can apply that to your transformation as well. Now, the thing is here that a transformation that's going to take a while, whether you have a large organization or a medium organization or even just 3 teams, it's really a change management project, right? And change management is a well understood field. And it turns out that there's this model out there called the Cotter change model. And what Cotter did was, when he designed this, is he realized that many organizations, when they try to implement change, they run into the exact same set of problems time and time again. So really, he's just pointing out that here are the 8 common problems that people run into, and here is the strategy for dealing with it. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on what the Cotter change model is, but here I have adapted it for Agile, and what it basically says is you need a guiding coalition. So if you've got 100 people that are trying to go Agile and you've got exactly one person that really believes in it, that's not going to succeed. I'm sorry, it's just not, right? You need a guiding coalition. You need a number of people that are behind it on the same page, and if you don't have that, don't start. There's not much point, right? And what you need to do is establish a sense of urgency. We need to do this soon, or we're going to get our, somebody's going to eat our lunch, or we're not going to be as profitable. And you need to have a clear vision. You need to empower people. So if you've got somebody in an organization that really doesn't want to go agile, right, and perhaps they're a manager, and something comes up and you need their support, or agile's going to fail, and you don't have the conversation with them, you don't make it clear that their compensation depends on the success, or whatever it is, and they see they can get away with it, then they're going to, and that's the end of your agile transformation right then and there. So, and whether it's agile or not, this is exactly the kind of thing that happens with any large change. If you don't have a sense of urgency, you don't have a vision, you're not doing empowerment, you don't have a plan for ongoing wins, whatever the large changes you're trying to implement in your organization, it's not going to work, right? And the same thing for constant communication. If you got an email that goes out from the CEO saying we're going agile, and then that's it, well, that's competing with the thousands and thousands of emails that go out every day that are talking about the way we do things around here today that has nothing to do with your change, right? So, and you got to keep going, and you can't stop until people say, oh, yeah, I know you're a new person, and you're asking why do we have this retrospective? That's because that's the way we do things around here. Not until you hear that's the way we do things around here about everything, and it's talking about Agile, are you done. Can't stop till then, or it will backslide. All right. So, in summary, right, the enterprise agility approach is a large topic. This has just been an introduction to it. It consists of the pieces of the Agile Maturity Matrix Tool, right, the spreadsheet, the Enterprise Agility Model, which is the picture that explains it overall visually, and then the Enterprise Agility Guide, which is it's about 10 pages. It has the transformation approach, the various practices, and it doesn't go into detail, right? It just says use the quot or change model, and then there's a pointer to that. It says use test-driven development and why that's important. It doesn't tell you how to do it, right? So it's a guide, right? It's an overall approach, and most people doing Agile are already doing some of these pieces. The key important thing of the enterprise agility approach is to put it all in one place that's easily digestible, that people can use as a reference. And this is one of the approaches that we support at Eliason. Like I said, we support Scaled Agile Framework, Enterprise Agility, roll your own, of course. And as Scrum.org gets Enterprise Scrum up to speed, we'll look into that. And whatever makes sense for your organization. And usually people mix and match, right? So the Maturity Matrix tool can be, for instance, used with Scaled Agile Framework, which has its own, but it doesn't speak particularly to transformation. It doesn't have different levels. It just has, how well are you doing a particular thing, right? So you can mix and match and all that kind of stuff. So at the end of the day, if you were to do all of this, right, you would have something that looks like this, an organization that looks like this, where folks are asking for stuff, it's turned into MVPs, which is broken down into epics and then stories. It's assigned to programs, funding decisions are made, people escalate problems all up, even right up to the top management quickly. Epics are broken down into stories, assigned to teams. Teams are doing one-piece flow. They're integrating continuously across the product. You've got one-click deploy to get it out there when you need it. You're measuring cycle time overall, trying to get that down. This is what you want your organization to look like. Now, I don't want to give the impression that I know all kinds of companies all over the place that are implementing enterprise agility just like this. Definitely not the case. Same for Scale Agile Framework, right? So usually, people implement pieces of this. And I know a number of organizations that are doing a lot of these parts. For instance, in our engagements, all of our engagements are using the Maturity Matrix tool. Many of them are using some of the team level practices, and then a bunch are using some of the organizational practices. But it's the kind of thing where it's still early days with enterprise agility. Folks have mostly focused on the team level, Scrum, XP, and Kanban. Right, so this is a new and exciting world, and I want to hand it over to you, Hemant, and maybe talk a little bit about Synerzip, and then we'll get into the questions.
Perfect. Thank you, Damon. So, folks, what we'll do at this point, as usual, is I'm going to take just a couple minutes to introduce Synerzip, if it is new to you guys who are first time attending this webinar. And while I'm doing that, you're welcome to send in some questions in the Q&A panel reflecting on what Damon just covered. We already have a few questions lined up, but it'll allow you some time. So let me kind of go through SynerZip quick overview. So this page has SynerZip in a nutshell. And Damon, you can build it out. I'll keep you doing the control of the slides. So SynerZip in a nutshell is a software development, product development partner, typically focused on small to mid-size venture-backed software companies. We do software development for our clients, and while the intellectual property is there, of course, theirs in each case, but we do complete or any part of software development lifecycle. And for each client, what we do is we put together a dedicated team of high caliber software professionals, in line with the Agile spirit, and every individual carries their weight and is a high caliber professional. And that team that works for our clients, the dedicated team, works as a seamless extension of a client's local team here in the US. And given our approach to Agile development, we are able to help our clients reduce the risk of software development delivery. As you all know, software is complex enough itself, and Agile helps a lot with short cycles of delivery, reduce the risk of quality and the direction of what you're to deliver. And we are able to do that, apply that balance for our clients. Some of our clients tend to be really small startup companies, some are mature software companies. Either way, we are able to apply what I would call an appropriate level of engineering discipline that their business calls for, all within the framework of Agile practices. Fourth point is we are able to provide a significant cost reduction to our clients. We have a dual shore delivery model. We have a team in US on stateside in Texas and San Francisco, and we have a team in India. And with that combination, we are able to provide consistently 50% cost advantage to our US clients. So that's, and the last point here as it comes on your screen is the flexibility. We provide significant flexibility to our clients by letting them start out with a team with SynerZip, and then as they grow and want to set up a captive development center they can take the team with them that is working for them at SynerZip and create their own captive development center. And Damon, if you can go to the next page, maybe a few clicks will get you there. And next page has a glimpse of a number of our clients, just a representative set. There's a bunch of these logos on this page, so it might take a few seconds to refresh on your screen. But this is almost all are small to mid-sized companies, a few larger companies in here and a few really small companies, but most of them are small to mid-sized, typically venture-backed companies that we've been working with. Almost all our clients tend to be long-term relationships. So that's as much about SynerZip overview. Let's kind of go to the next page, and we'll keep that page there while we take questions. So we have a number of questions here. Let's take the first one, which is, so what really is the fundamental difference between, you showed a safe scaled Agile framework approach for taking enterprise-wide Agile adoption and this Enterprise Agile model. Can you highlight when is one more suitable than others?
Sure. And actually, just quickly, I think I forgot to mention this earlier. If folks are interested in getting the Enterprise Agility materials for their own use, the presentation, the spreadsheet, the guide, the picture, just on the Q&A panel, just say I'd like a copy, and we'll get you a copy. So, right, at the high level, I mean, they're trying to address the exact same problem, right? So just like Scrum, Kanban, and XP are trying to help you be agile at the team level, both SAFe and Enterprise Agility are looking to help you be agile across the enterprise. And just to reiterate, at Eliason, while we're working to get the idea of Enterprise Agility out there, we're totally agnostic, and it's really up to what makes sense for the excuse me, client's needs. And often what we'll end up doing is doing mix and match. Like folks that are doing SAFe will often adopt the maturity matrix because it helps with transformation, and also do the quot or change model and that kind of stuff. Totally able to mix and match. So as far as differentiation, though, folks, like to see how things are different. Um, One is that, for instance, SAFe doesn't have a specific transformation approach. It's just talking about what it looks like to be safe, and then actually implementing it. They have clients and consultants that can help you with that. Um, right? So then, again, how you do an assessment. SAFe has its own agility assessment tool, right? And they're a little bit different. The enterprise agility is focused around, has the additional dimension of so showing you how you're doing on your adoption, going from, I'm not doing a practice to, it's sustainable or whatever. Um, the SAFe model does include Kanban at the portfolio level, but really, suggest using Scrum XP at the team level. And one of the things about enterprise agility that we didn't really get into is that the idea is that you would start to move towards Kanban even at the team level. And it's a little bit of an advanced thing. Not everybody's ready for it, but you'll hear a lot about continuous deployment, continuous delivery these days, and that's really that requires Kanban. So there's a slight leaning towards Kanban at the team level, but if you want to do Scrum, that's fine. There's a couple things I think around SAFe that are great when you're getting started at the enterprise level. That I believe that even the folks in SAFe would say, okay, well, you might not want to keep that forever. But for instance, the idea of a hardening sprint is spelled out in SAFe. And that's not, so there's a different approach in enterprise agility, which is to have a release tail that you try to reduce over time. And then I think the other thing about it is that the guide for enterprise agility really is just the 10 pages. And there's a number of books out there. Dean Leffingwell's spacing off the top of my head, but there's a book he has on requirements that spells out a lot of the stuff in SAFe. So it's a fairly large model, and it's somewhat prescriptive, which is great. The idea with enterprise agility is it's a little less prescriptive, and it's something that you flesh out on your own. And it's not to say that one is better than the other per se. That's more sort of like what you're looking for. If you're looking for a guide that's more sort of like the Scrum guide, then that would be sort of an enterprise agility thing. If you're looking for something maybe a little more fleshed out, then maybe the place to look there would be SAFe. But again, like I said at Elias, and we support both, and that's really a client call and try to tailor to what the client is looking for.
Okay, excellent. This is very helpful. Okay, so let's take the next question. You went through 44